My name is Margaret Carter. I'm 68 years old, retired after 34 years as an elementary school principal. And 2 weeks ago, my daughter-in-law tried to hand me a drink she didn't expect me to survive. That glass, chilled just enough to fawn at the base, carried more than rosemary and gin. It carried months of gaslight, years of silence, and a cocktail of something darker. The kind of darkness that doesn't shout. It smiles, perfect and practiced. And when I looked at her, Lauren, standing across the table with that cocktail in hand, it wasn't paranoia whispering in my chest. It was clarity. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We were at her home in Portland. The usual family dinner. Her mother, Deborah, had flown in again, uninvited, as always, but reigning like a monarch over the roast chicken and reclaimed wood centerpieces. My son, Daniel, was laughing at some story about yoga retreats or something equally detached from the life we used to share. And Lauren watched me like I was a fragile painting she intended to replace. Let me go back. Before the glass, before the swap, before the slow unravel. My late husband, George, used to say, "Margaret, you see through people like X-rays." I did. Until I didn't. Until I wanted to believe too badly. Daniel was my only child. When George passed, I worked nights at the library just to keep us afloat. Daniel used to bring me microwave popcorn while I graded essays and say, "Someday, I'll take care of you." And he meant it. I swear he meant it, but sometimes love ages faster than people do. The first time I met Lauren was at a company cookout. She was dazzling, truly. The kind of woman who seems like she lives in candlelight, who makes people feel dull just by standing next to them. I didn't distrust her. I distrusted myself for not liking how easily she spoke over Daniel, how she corrected him mid-sentence with that half smile that makes people feel small without understanding why. Still, I told myself, "Margaret, don't be the difficult mother-in-law." So I smiled. I even laughed when she gifted me wrinkle cream that Christmas. Wrapped in gold paper, bow and all. "You'll thank me," she said. And when she handed me that glass, at the latest dinner, garnished with rosemary from her garden, I took it. I turned it slightly, watched the sprig float like a little flag, but I didn't drink it. I waited. Her mother was bragging about property taxes and wine cellars. Daniel wasn't looking. And in that sliver of space, that breath between bites, I reached forward and switched the glasses. Mine for hers. It was simple, soft, surgical. No one noticed. But 35 minutes later, someone did notice. Deborah, her face flushing crimson, hands trembling, voice slurring like wet cloth. The chairs scraped. Someone shouted her name. And me? I just sat there, still holding the glass that had been meant for me. It didn't start with poison. It started with disappearing. Not all at once, like a slammed door. No, it was slower than that. Like the paint peeling on a window frame. One dinner I wasn't invited to. One holiday where the plans shifted last minute. One missed call. Then two. Then silence. After Daniel married Lauren, the shift was immediate, and so well-dressed, it almost looked like coincidence. The first Christmas, I got the wrong time for dinner. showed up as the dessert plates were being cleared. Everyone smiled too hard, acted like it wasn't awkward, and Lauren said, "We just assumed you'd be tired." I remember standing in that doorway, clutching a bottle of wine that no one opened. That night, I ate leftover ham alone while reruns buzzed on the TV. It sounds small, doesn't it? Trivial. But distance rarely begins with big fights. It begins with mismatched expectations, with apologies that never come, with seating charts where you suddenly find yourself at the kids' table. I didn't want to admit I was being edged out, that my place in Daniel's life had a timer counting down. So I made excuses. For them, for myself. Maybe Lauren was adjusting to married life. Maybe Daniel was busy. Maybe I was imagining the tight smiles, the offhanded comments. But they kept stacking. The guest room they once called mine suddenly had new decor. My old quilt, gone. My toothbrush, missing. A friend of Lauren's, staying over more often than I was welcome. And then there were the glances between her and her mother. Fleeting, loaded, surgical. Deborah Whitmore. If ice could wear pearls, it would look like her. The first time we met, she didn't shake my hand, just looked me up and down like I was a vendor at a flea market. During the engagement dinner, she leaned across the table, her voice sweet and sharpened. "Daniel, are you sure you're ready to marry someone from such a modest background?" I smiled, that wide, aching smile women learn to wear when the room is too full and too polite for the truth. I swallowed her insult and the roast beef. George would have called it out. He always had a gift for turning passive aggression into punchlines. But George was gone, and I was learning how to be the quiet version of myself, the version that gets tolerated but never invited. The wedding was beautiful, though. Lauren looked like a magazine cover. Her mother walked her down the aisle. I stood behind her in the second row. She wanted it that way, said it was simpler. What would be the point? When Daniel read his vows, I searched his eyes for that boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. But he was looking at her like she hung the stars. He never looked back at me. I clapped, I smiled, I took photos on my old iPhone, and later, when Lauren thanked everyone who shaped her journey, I nodded along, while Deborah held her arm like it was a trophy. That was the night I realized I was no longer family. I was legacy. Something to be displayed, but not really kept. I started feeling it a few months after their honeymoon. A fog. That's the only word that fits. Not exhaustion, exactly. More like a dimmer switch had been turned down on my mind. It happened after dinners at their house, or brunches I didn't remember agreeing to. Always after I ate something Lauren had cooked, or drank something she'd poured. One time it was a lavender-infused lemonade, chilled and served in glasses that still had the sticker residue on the bottom. Another time, a tea, chamomile and lemon balm, she said. It'll help with your nerves. I didn't remember telling her I had nerves that needed help, but I sipped it anyway. 30 minutes later, I couldn't remember where I'd parked my car. That was the first time I wrote it down. Just a scribble in a grocery list notebook. Brunch, scrambled eggs, Lauren poured orange juice, felt floaty after. Foggy eyes, confused in driveway. I chalked it up to grief, or age, or hormones. I even Googled menopause brain fog at 2 in the morning, just to have an excuse that didn't feel so terrifying. Because how do you say, I feel like I'm slowly disappearing without sounding paranoid? I started testing myself. On days I didn't see them, I'd cook simple meals, breathe slower, track how I felt. On those days, I was sharp, steady, clear. But on their days, I'd forget names mid-sentence. I'd find bruises on my arms I didn't remember getting. One morning, I woke up and the pill container in my purse looked off, 2 tablets crushed at the bottom. I hadn't touched them. When I mentioned it, gently, to Daniel, he barely blinked. Mom, you've always been forgetful. That word stung more than I let show. Always? I wanted to ask. Since when? And Lauren? She just smiled from across the dinner table and passed me another glass of something fizzy. You should drink more water. It helps with clarity. That word again, clarity. They both used it a lot. What's worse is that they were so kind about it. So terribly kind. Lauren printed out vitamin charts. She left supplements on my pillow. She booked me a meditation app, just something to help with sleep. I didn't sleep. Not deeply. I started leaving early from their house, saying I had meetings, that my back hurt, that I had to water my neighbor's plants. But she still handed me drinks on my way out, always with a smile, always just a little something to take the edge off. The edge of what? The worst was how normal it all looked. I wasn't being screamed at. I wasn't locked away. I was being softened. Subtly, elegantly. Like butter melting in a pan. Like memory diluted through a pretty straw. And yet, I kept showing up. Kept smiling. Because the alternative, believing that my daughter-in-law was slowly erasing me, was too cruel to accept. Until I had no choice. Until the night I stared at the rosemary in the drink and realized that even plants have more natural defense than I did. The first time she made a joke about my memory, it was subtle. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us. I was telling her about a book I'd read, something about widows rebuilding their lives, and I paused mid-sentence to remember the author's name. It was on the tip of my tongue. Lauren grinned. You know what they say, Margaret. First it's names, then it's where you live. I chuckled. It was easier, safer. But something in me wilted. It didn't stop there. She gave me a key finder for Mother's Day, wrapped in pink tissue with a card that read, "For when life gets a little too slippery." The laughter that followed around the brunch table felt rehearsed. Daniel kissed her on the cheek. He said, "You're terrible." She wasn't. She was methodical. Deborah found it hilarious. She said, "At least you're not wandering out of Target barefoot like my cousin Gloria. Yet." That word again, yet. Like they were waiting for something, watching the clock on my mental health tick downward. But what do you do when the insults are camouflaged in charm? One Christmas, Lauren gave me wrinkle cream in a silver pouch. This changed my skin, and I figured, well, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. And when I brought up how my arthritis was acting up, she clapped her hands together and said, "We should get you one of those stylish canes with floral prints. You'd rock it." Everyone laughed, except me. I laughed with them, of course, but only on the outside. It was death by compliments. She told me my meatloaf was nostalgic. She asked if I wanted help learning Google Docs. She spoke slowly when explaining things like I'd been dropped into the modern world yesterday. Once I asked Daniel if he thought I was slipping. He looked up from his phone and said, "Don't take it personally. That's just how Lauren is." How she is. As if passive cruelty is a personality type. And slowly, I stopped speaking up. I'd pour the water, pass the napkins, laugh at my own expense just to keep things smooth. But my body was collecting the bruises my heart didn't have time to process. Little things kept vanishing when I visited. My favorite mug, gone. My reading glasses, replaced with a newer pair I never bought. Even my medication bottles looked rearranged in their travel bag, the labels slightly misaligned, like someone had peeled and stuck them back on. I began to write more. My notebook became my shadow. I wrote down every joke, every dish, every symptom. It wasn't even conscious at first, just a need to put things somewhere. The tension wasn't loud, it was careful, stylized, Pinterest-perfect hostility. And I kept showing up, like a character in someone else's play, smiling through the part I didn't audition for. Until I realized the performance wasn't for me. It was for everyone else.
You don't need chains to erase a person. You just need suggestion, a little doubt, a little, "She's been off lately." A gentle correction here, a worried comment there. Do that long enough, and eventually people stop asking if you're okay and start wondering if you're the problem. That's how it begins. I wasn't locked away. I was nudged into silence, into irrelevance, into what they wanted the world to see, a woman unraveling, slowly, inexplicably. And so I fought back, with paper. I started keeping records. It felt paranoid at first, even to me, but the fear was sharper than the shame. So I documented everything. I bought a second notebook, spiral-bound, plain blue cover. I kept it in my bedroom drawer and never brought it with me to their house. I only wrote in it after I returned home, alone, when the fog cleared. Each entry had the same format: date, meal, drink, who served it, how I felt 30 minutes after, 1 hour after. And slowly, patterns emerged. Dizzy after rosemary lemonade, disoriented after turmeric tea, tremors after her homemade focus smoothie. Only on days Lauren served me something. I stopped taking the supplements she gave me. Instead, I sealed them in a sandwich bag and labeled them Pill A, Pill B. I started taking pictures. I kept them all on an old phone I'd factory reset just for this. Some tablets were crushed, some had powder residue. I wasn't a chemist, but I knew when something had been tampered with. One morning, my regular medication had 2 pills missing, taken, not by me. I hadn't been to their house in 2 days, and still they were gone. I counted again. They were gone. And then came the straw that cracked the illusion. A small lunch, just Lauren and me. She made soup, cauliflower leek, served it in white porcelain bowls, hers slightly fuller than mine. She handed me a pill container before we ate. Daily Balance, she said, tapping the label. Helps with mood swings. I smiled, took it, didn't swallow, excused myself to the restroom, and spit it into a tissue, flushed it down, then snapped a photo of the bottle with her fingerprint still smudged on the lid. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because the truth had finally settled in, and truth has a weight to it,
a kind of heaviness that wraps itself around your ribs and doesn't let go. They weren't trying to hurt me quickly. They were trying to remove me, slowly, neatly, without noise. I pictured the plan. A string of little episodes, Lauren logging everyone on her phone, maybe even filming them. Proof that I was slipping. She'd suggest assisted living. Daniel would hesitate, but Lauren would comfort him. "It's for her safety," she'd whisper. And then they'd have access to everything George left me. The retirement accounts, the vintage Mustang in the garage, the antique coin collection. All of it. Not because they needed it, because they could. So I kept writing, kept bagging evidence, kept showing up to their house as if I hadn't noticed anything. But I was watching now, and waiting. Because if they were building a case, so was I.
It was a Sunday. Lauren sent the invitation by text, full of exclamation marks and artificial warmth. "Can't wait to see you, Margaret. Just a small family dinner." The kind of message you write after deleting a more honest one. I stared at the text for a long time. I already knew I would go. I already knew what I'd bring. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't nervous. I was still. Calm like an undertow. I baked an apple crisp that morning, my recipe, extra cinnamon, coarse sugar crust. Lauren hated it, which is precisely why I made it. I placed it in my glass dish, wrapped it in a faded kitchen towel, and added a Ziplocked pill bottle in my purse. The one with 2 missing capsules, just in case. Their house smelled like eucalyptus and lemon. Too clean, like a spa trying too hard to be home. Deborah was already perched at the counter, holding a glass of red wine like it was an accessory. Daniel kissed my cheek without making eye contact. Lauren greeted me with that sugary voice she used when cameras were around. "Margaret, you look lovely. That sweater's such a fun color." It wasn't a compliment. It never was. Dinner was mostly silence padded with property talk. Deborah boasted about renovations. Daniel mumbled about work. Lauren nodded like a well-trained host. Then, dessert plates were cleared. And she said it. "I made something just for you, Margaret." She smiled wide, teeth straight, voice laced with performance, walked over to the bar cart and picked up a glass. Clear, pink-tinged liquid, floating sprig of rosemary, ice cubes like diamonds. She walked it over like it was communion. "This one's special. My own recipe. You're going to love it." I took the glass, fingers steady. I didn't sip, just smiled and said, "Thank you, dear." She turned back toward the kitchen, and I waited. Deborah stood up to adjust the thermostat. Lauren leaned in to whisper something to Daniel, laughing too loudly. That was my moment. With no hesitation, I reached across the table and swapped the glasses. Mine for Deborah's. The same garnish, the same chilled glass, the same poison, I was certain of it. The switch was smooth, decisive. Deborah returned, picked up the glass, clinked it against her mimosa, sipped without question. I folded my hands in my lap and exhaled once. Now I just had to wait. 35 minutes. I knew the pattern by now. I tracked it, I lived it, and now she would. Lauren looked at me twice, her expression twitching with confusion. Maybe the drink didn't disappear fast enough. Maybe the reaction wasn't immediate. I waited. And then I saw it. Deborah rubbed her temple, paused mid-sentence, blinked. "Just a little tired," she muttered. She tried to stand, wobbled, her face flushed a deep red, her speech slurred slightly. Daniel leaned in. "Are you okay?" Deborah swayed. "Wine? Maybe it's just hot in here." But I knew. I watched her body betray her.
the way mine had for months. I stayed silent, and I watched Lauren watch her mother.
The glass tipped. It didn't shatter, just wobbled on the edge of the table before settling in a ring of condensation. Deborah clutched her chest and muttered something none of us understood. Her voice, once polished and commanding, had collapsed into static. Lauren froze. Her movements were just a half-second too slow to be instinctive. She stood, then sat back down. Her eyes darted, not to her mother, not to Daniel, but to the glass. To my glass. Only it wasn't mine anymore. Daniel shouted her name. "Mom, can you hear me?" He looked at Lauren, panicked, helpless. She fumbled with her phone, dialed 911. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. "My mom, I think she's having some kind of reaction. Maybe wine, maybe meds. Please, we need help." But she never said what else had been in the glass. I rose quietly, picked up the glass she had given me, held it in the light like it was a clue in a detective novel. I didn't need to say anything. The gesture said it all. Daniel turned to me. "Mom, what are you doing?" I met his eyes. "This is the drink she made for me. I didn't drink it." That's when Lauren's composure broke. Her voice cracked, face blanching. That's not the one I gave you." She stopped herself mid-sentence, too late to retract, too flustered to cover. The room shifted. The air thickened. I said nothing, just gently handed the glass to the EMT when they arrived minutes later. This was served to me. I didn't touch it. He sniffed, looked at the floating rosemary, bagged it without a word. They loaded Deborah onto the stretcher. She moaned once, incoherent. Her hands spasmed as they wrapped the cuff around her arm. Lauren hovered like a stunned actress missing her cue. The officer arrived not long after. He was calm, young, carried a small notebook and a voice recorder clipped to his chest. "Just need to take some statements," he said. "Standard protocol." Lauren jumped in. It must have been a mix-up. Maybe her medications didn't sit well, or maybe she was dehydrated. It's been hot lately. The officer raised a hand gently. "Ma'am, one at a time." I opened my purse and handed him my notebook. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "What's this?" "Notes. Meals, symptoms, dates. I've been keeping them for months." He flipped through the first few pages, said nothing. Then I pulled out the pill bottle with the labels slightly peeled. "I didn't take these," I said. "She gave them to me, said they'd help me sleep." Daniel finally looked up. "Lauren, did you—" His voice trailed off. I couldn't read his face. That was the moment I saw the truth settle in his eyes. Not fully, not yet, but the seed had cracked. The officer took the notebook, the glass, the pills, my statements. Lauren stood against the counter, arms folded tight, face pale. "She's framing me," she said suddenly, sharply. "She switched the drinks. She must have switched them. Why else would she mention it?" I turned to her, my voice calm. "You handed me the drink. You called it special. I never touched it. Your mother did." The officer didn't blink. He just wrote it all down. And Lauren, she didn't deny it. Not convincingly. 2 days after the police took my statement, Daniel showed up at my door without calling first. I opened it, half expecting someone else, maybe a delivery, maybe silence. But there he was, my son. No overnight bag, no suitcase,
just his car keys in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other, like it might explain everything. I stepped aside to let him in. He didn't say a word. He walked straight to the armchair where George used to sit, placed the paper on his knee, rubbed his palms down his jeans, like he was trying to rub away whatever guilt had grown on him overnight. Then he said it. "She didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. You have to believe that." It wasn't what I expected, and yet somehow it was exactly what I feared. I didn't answer him, just stood still, watching a man who once cried when he skinned his knee now defend the woman who tried to erase me slowly and politely. "She panicked," he said. "She thought you were struggling, that maybe you weren't safe, that maybe it was necessary. But she never meant... I drugged you, Daniel." His name hit the air like a dropped plate, sharp, sudden. He flinched, looked down, swallowed hard. "I read the toxicology report, the pills, the drink. I know." He didn't even try to deny it now, just stared at the floor, like the truth was a pattern in the wood he hadn't noticed before. He ran a hand through his hair. "She said it was just to help, to ease things. She thought it'd make things better." "For her?" I asked. He didn't answer that. Silence wrapped the room in cotton. The walls felt closer than they had 5 minutes ago, or maybe I was just finally hearing the truth without all the soft talk and wedding gloss. "She's gone," he said after a pause. "Packed up yesterday, took the car, cleared out the savings." A slow breath escaped me. I wasn't surprised. He looked up. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I didn't argue. Not then. Not when his face looked like it had collapsed from the inside out. But in my heart, I knew. He hadn't wanted to know. That's the real betrayal, isn't it? Not when someone lies, but when someone loves you less than their own comfort. We sat in silence for a while. He didn't cry. I didn't reach for him. He didn't ask for forgiveness, not directly, and I didn't offer it. Because this wasn't the part where things get stitched up. This was the unraveling. He asked about the will, about the house, about the trust George and I had built. I told him the truth. It's not yours anymore. I expected anger, but all he did was nod. Small, like a man finally seeing the cliff he'd been walking toward blindfolded. And then he asked, "Will you come to the hearing?" I looked at him. "No," I said. "I've already lived it."
The day after Daniel left, I called Arthur. Arthur's been my lawyer since George and I bought our first fixer-upper in Eugene. He watched us rise from nothing, draft our first will on a kitchen table while we ate spaghetti off paper plates. When George died, Arthur was the one who helped me breathe through the paperwork. Each signature, a tiny funeral. This time I told him I wanted everything changed. We sat in his office, surrounded by dusty leather books and the faint scent of old printer ink. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I pulled out the same notebook I gave to the police, placed it beside the revised toxicology report, and said, "I want them removed." Arthur didn't flinch, just picked up his pen. No more legacy clauses for Daniel, no emergency care fund for Lauren, no shared assets, no soft exit ramps. I didn't leave behind a key or a kindness. I made it clean, quiet, final. But I didn't stop there. George always said,
if you want to outlive your enemies, plant something. So I did. Not revenge, roots. I set up a fund for veterans, the same garage George used to volunteer at, restoring old military jeeps with rusted bolts and dusty radios. I created a scholarship for girls in rural Oregon who wanted to study mechanical engineering, because George believed women belonged under hoods and behind the wheel as much as any man. I rerouted our investments into charities George used to write anonymous checks to. Our story, our savings were no longer theirs to weaponize. Then I saved the most personal part for last, my granddaughter, Sophie. She's only 6 now, with Lauren's cheekbones and Daniel's eyes. She doesn't understand any of this, not yet, but once, during a visit when Lauren wasn't around, she climbed into my lap and whispered, "Grandma, when you hug me, my heart stops hurting." So I wrote her into the will. All of it. Locked in a trust she'll receive when she turns 25. But only if neither Daniel nor Lauren have any financial or legal control over her life. Not one signature, not one influence. Arthur made sure of it. Ironclad. And then I wrote the letter. Not typed, not emailed, handwritten on thick cream paper with blue ink and a spine full of time. It took me 3 days. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to say it with grace. I told the truth about the drinks, the fog, the tea, the pills, the switch, the silence, the moment I sat at a dinner table and watched the lie collapse under its own weight while I held the glass that was meant to end me. I didn't lace it with bitterness. I didn't ask for pity. I simply told what happened. I ended with this. Sometimes survival is loud. Sometimes it's just a hand staying steady when someone hopes you'll shake. I gave the letter to Arthur with instructions. Deliver it to Sophie on my passing. No sooner, no later. Let them spend their lives wondering what it says. Let the truth arrive on its own timeline. Because justice doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it comes in a quiet envelope.
3 years have passed since the last time I stepped foot in their house. The cottage I found is just outside Newport, Oregon. It sits at the edge of a cliff where the air smells like salt and driftwood, and the fog rolls in soft as a prayer. Ivy climbs the porch, wind chimes sing at night. My neighbors wave but don't ask questions. That's how I like it. I planted herbs out back. Basil, thyme, rosemary, especially rosemary. Every time I trim a stem, I remember the drink, the clink of ice, the smile that almost killed me, and every time I breathe easier, because I didn't just survive, I outlasted it. They tried to make me a ghost, but ghosts don't plant things, they haunt. I built. I volunteer now, twice a week at the community center downtown. We serve soup on Thursdays and teach digital basics to seniors on Saturdays. No one there calls me Mrs. Carter. They call me Miss Margaret, and they love my banana bread. No one there knows what I survived. They just know I show up, steady, smiling, present. Daniel writes sometimes, short texts, thinking of you, hope you're okay, Sophie misses you. I don't respond. Not because I'm cruel, but because he never once said the thing that matters. I believe you. Not once did he say, I'm sorry I let her do that to you. And silence can only be forgiven if it stops being silent. I still keep the notebook, not for evidence anymore, just habit. I log what I plant, what I bake, what time the tide comes in. The pages are full of things that grow. One entry reads,
Sophie turns 9 next week. Her trust is thriving. She'll be okay. She'll have a shot at softness. Because that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not even justice, really. Just safety. For her. For me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout in courtrooms. I didn't demand to be heard at dinners where I was treated like an old photograph, kept around for memory, not meaning. I just stopped drinking, stopped doubting, started documenting, and the truth did the rest. That's the thing about people like Lauren and Deborah. They underestimate quiet women. They think silence is surrender. But silence is a strategy when you're paying attention. It's the space where patterns emerge. It's where stories sharpen. I don't need them to know what I did. I don't need to see the look on their faces when Sophie opens that letter someday and learns what her grandmother survived without applause. I just need to know that she'll live in a world where truth doesn't hide under rosemary sprigs. That she'll know legacy is something you protect, not manipulate. That she'll understand you don't need to scream to win. You just need to last. They tried to silence her with kindness, with herbal cocktails and well-timed concern. But she didn't vanish. She watched. She wrote. And when the moment was right, she let the truth speak for her. Margaret Carter didn't rage. She didn't beg. She stayed. She saw. And in the end, she passed the truth forward, one rosemary stem and handwritten letter at a time. Have you ever sensed something wasn't right, but felt too alone to speak up? When was the moment you decided to trust yourself over the people around you? If this story stirred something in you, like it did in me, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still needs reminding. You don't need permission to protect yourself. Sometimes the loudest justice comes from the quietest refusal to disappear.